Good afternoon, everybody. It's 1:30. I think we'll get started. Welcome to the last of our Care for Creation Stories of Resilience series. Our social justice ministries team at this church felt it was important to share resilience stories after the devastation of Hurricane Ian. So we are delighted to host our speaker, Dr. Terry Root. Dr. Root is a senior fellow, university faculty, emerita in Stanford's Woods Institute for the Environment at Stanford University. Her research addresses how plants and animals are changing with the changing climate. She was a lead author of the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change Fourth Assessment Report in 2007, that in 2007 was co-awarded the Nobel Peace Prize with Vice President Al Gore. Also, she was a lead author of the third assessment report in 2001 and a review editor for the fifth assessment report in 2014. In addition to other honors, Dr. Root was awarded the Spirit of Defenders Award for Science by Defenders of Wildlife in 2010 and Lifetime Achievement Award in 2016 from the conservation organization Point Blue. She has served on the boards and as science advisor to several non-governmental organizations, including the National Audubon Board from 2010 through 2019. And currently, she's on the board of Defenders of Wildlife, Renewable Energy and Wildlife Institute, and Birds Caribbean. It gives me great pleasure for the fourth time to introduce Dr. Terry Root.
Oh, Lori, you're wonderful. I don't need it. I've got my thing, so thank you. Oh my gosh. I know I'm truly not a member of your community, but I feel like I'm a member of your community. So thank you so much for making me feel so welcome. And thank you for coming out today. I know some of you have seen some of these pictures, like that one, for instance, but I promise I'm going to tell you new stuff. I promise that. So I don't have a way to change the slides. Mike, what do I... Just say next? Okay, let me tell you what I'm going to talk about. So the next slide shows you what I'm going to be talking to you about today. And again, many of you have seen this slide, but what I want to talk to you about is climate since the 1850s. Why the 1850s? It's because what we have done, the scientists with the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, what we have done is we look at what the temperature was, the average temperature from 1850 to 1900. And that's considered what it was when it was natural, because humans hadn't done anything yet. So all of the data that I'm going to be showing, not all, but most of the data that I'm going to be showing you today is going to show you a change in temperature. And it's the change from, they take the temperature today and they subtract it from that average, and that gives you what the change is. So 1850s to 1900 is a very important time period here. Then we're going to look at future climate change. And as I like to say, I don't have a clear crystal ball, but I have a really good cloudy one. And we're going to look at that cloudy crystal ball and try and figure out what we might be having in the future. And then, because I'm a biologist, I have to talk about other species. I have to. They're really what I'm super, super concerned about, but I'll tell you why then. And if you've been to one of my talks before, you'll know that the first, the second, and the third part of my talk are very, very depressing. So if you have to leave before I get to the fourth point, leave now. Otherwise, you're going to go slit your wrists. So I promise you, when we get to number four is really important because it talks about what the nation is doing, woohoo, and what each of us here in this room, including me, what we can do. Now, I want to say something else about this slide. It has a yellow-throated warbler on it. I'm a bird person, so most of my slides, I actually think all of my slides, but anyway, most of my slides have birds on them. The thing is that the ones that have the name underneath it, like yellow-throated warbler, where it has there, those are birds that National Audubon Society did a study and said if we go up 3 degrees above natural, above the 1850 to 1900, so 3 degrees Celsius above natural, that bird will probably go extinct. It will not occur in the summertime breeding here in Florida. Okay, so next slide, please. First thing we have to do is we have to talk about this crazy weather we've had. Absolutely crazy. When was the last time you saw snow behind the Hollywood sign? I don't think I ever have. That's a crazy thing. Next slide. So, and Yosemite snowfall, whoops, go back. The Yosemite snowfall in 2023 broke a 54-year-old record just now. So it's a real strong abnormal. Next slide, please. This is the one that you all know when Ted Cruz took off and went to Mexico and left all of his constituents high and dry and freezing cold. This was in February 15 to 17 of 2021. And this was one of the cold vortices that were happening. And Senator Imhoff, who is from Oklahoma, said, see, we don't have climate change because it's freezing in Texas. The reason it was freezing in Texas is because the Arctic has melted and it's warm and you don't have the vortices staying up where it's supposed to. We can talk more about that if you want to, but this is classic climate change. Next slide, please. And now, how many of you know where Linton, British Columbia is? There's the border between the US, the white line is a border between US and Canada, and here's this little bitty tiny town in British Columbia, not very far away from the border. And next slide. And what happened was on June 27th, June 28th, June 29th, it went, these are in degrees Fahrenheit. You can see how warm it was. Next slide. These were all-time heat records. Each day broke the day before. The all-time heat record for Canada, all-time heat record, has just broken. It is getting warmer, so I would like Imhoff to actually notice. But anyway, so next slide, please. This is something that happened in Death Valley, and in August 16th, 2020, it hit 130 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 59 degrees Celsius. 130. At 104, things start cooking. What that means is the enzymes actually denature. So we're lucky enough, we're people, we can go inside where there's air conditioning. Phew, that's good. But what about the plants and animals? They literally, I'm really being serious, they literally were sitting out in the sun cooking. And then we thought, okay, we had it, it's not gonna happen again for another 50 years, maybe 30 years, okay, fine. And the very next summer, on July 9, it hit it again. So these are abnormals. Next slide. We've had floods. You guys have seen all the flooding that has been going on. It's just incredible. This is in the UK. I just couldn't believe that I love this picture, so anyway, that's why I used it. So this was in March in 2023. So we've had floods. Next slide. And we've had droughts. Here is a reservoir, big reservoir, huh? They put up the dam, they had the reservoir, it's completely now dried up in Uruguay. Completely. The point of all of this is to say we have a new abnormal. And I wish I could say it's not going to get worse than it is right now. Like they had a tornado in LA, or close to LA. I mean, that doesn't happen in California. Those abnormal events are going to become more common and more common and more common, because we are pushing the system so fast that things are going to be changing. Next slide, please. Okay, and I think you have to hit it again. There you go. Okay, this is global temperature change. Again, it's from the average of 1850 to 1900. This actually is in degrees Fahrenheit. This is one of the few curves that is in degrees Fahrenheit. I know it's kind of strange to have temperature going around in a circle, but you have all of the months, and you can see it's not that hot, right? So what this is it's right around 1 degree Fahrenheit, in between 0 and 1 degree, actually between -1 degree and 1 degree Fahrenheit. So it's going on, but now in '75, the birds told me that it started getting warmer. And I didn't have to have the birds, because all I had to do was start looking at a plot like this. Look at it getting warmer and warmer. We've lived through this, right? We know that it's that hot. It's out beyond 2 degrees. It's 2.1 degrees. And now if you look at it, I love the fact this shifts like this. So now you have 0 degrees, if I can do it. The 0 degrees are here, and then the 1 degree, and then the 2 degrees. You can see it has gotten warmer over our lifetimes. It really has. I don't care what Imhoff says, it has gotten warmer. There's no way around it. So next slide, please. And now I want to show you what, if you go way far out the other way, this all goes, the axis right here is 24,000 years before 1950. Why did they pick 1950? I have no idea. It seems a little weird. I would have picked 2000, but anyway, they picked 1950. So look at how the temperature has changed when you go out 24,000 years before 1950. It was a lot colder. Next slide, please. That's what the Earth looked like. Look at all of the glaciers. You can see the glaciers are there. It's really cold. There's a lot of glaciers. But then, next slide. 12,000 years ago, there were still glaciers, but not as much. But now when you get about 6,000, around in there, it starts leveling off. Next slide. There it is for 6,000. There's no glaciers there anymore. And that's pretty much what we have lived through all of our lives. All of us in this room have lived through until, next slide, humans came along and started putting CO2 and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And that now has caused us to warm so much more. So that's what it looked like in 2018. Next slide, please. So this is what has happened since Earth Day. You all remember Earth Day. And we felt like, okay, once we have Earth Day, we're going to take care of the environment. So that's why 1970 is so important. We're starting to take care of the environment in America. But this is what it's showing you. You have Fahrenheit on the y-axis, and you have time on the x-axis. And the average low temperature in the summer nights for all of the US has gone up 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a lot. That's over the average. The average for the whole globe is 2.1 to almost 2.2, but not really. Let's say it was 2.1, that's better. So the US in those warm summer nights has gotten warmer. Next slide, please. This is for Sarasota. This is the average low temperature for those warm summer nights. Look how much it's gone up in Sarasota. So you thought it was getting warmer? Folks, it has gotten a lot warmer. Since Earth Day, since we've been taking care of the Earth, it has warmed in the summertime, summer nights, by 6 degrees, almost 6 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a lot. Next slide, please. This is for Sarasota. This is winter warming, and this is the average temperature, and it's gone up 4.1. Again, much higher than the global average, which is 2.1. So Sarasota is getting a lot warmer. Next slide, please. And what really is driving this is the winter time. So the winter time, if the winter time is the blue curve, that on the y-axis still is degrees, on the x-axis is still time, but you have spring, summer, and fall are all together, but the winter is really pulling all of the data up. So we really are getting warmer. Winter is the big time here in Sarasota. Next slide, please. Okay, so why are we getting so warm? It's because of all those greenhouse gases up in the high atmosphere, up in the atmosphere. Greenhouse gases like CO2, that's the red curve, methane, which is the green curve, and nitrous oxides, which is the lower blue curve. And you can see this goes back 800,000 years ago. Now, people will say to me, Terry, yes, we have greenhouse gases up in the atmosphere, but it's not caused by people, it's caused by nature, it's all because of cycling. You can see the cycling, you can see it. There's cycles in the CO2, those are called Milankovitch cycles. And we can talk about what drives them, but anyway, if you look at the very end over there by 0, look at that spike going straight up. Next slide, please. We have not been above 300 parts per million CO2 for 800,000 years until now. And right now, next slide, right now we're at 421 parts per million. And you too can go online, you go to Bloomberg Carbon Clock, Bloomberg, I think it's period, carbon period clock, but I'm not sure about the periods. And you can see the carbon clock going, and it's actually keeping track of how much carbon is up in the atmosphere. It's very demoralizing. But anyway, I checked this last Sunday. That was what it was last Sunday, was 421. So that's a lot above 300. And we haven't been above 300 in 800,000 years, and before that too, undoubtedly, but we don't have those data. So you look at methane, it is spiked at 0. You look at nitrous oxide, it's spiked at 0. Folks, there's no doubt about it. We are the ones that are causing this. But that's not so bad. If we're the ones that are causing it, we can stop it. That's how I look at it. Okay, next slide, please. So now let's look at where all of this is coming from. This is per capita emissions, not per country. This is per capita, and it's tons of CO2e. And E is equivalence, and what that means is it's all the greenhouse gases put together, but it's measured in tons of CO2 so that we can kind of get a grasp of what's going on here. But look at the US, at least the curve is coming down. That's good, that's really good. Russia's is going up a little bit. Then we have Japan, it's staying pretty normal. China is going up. The EU and the UK is coming down. The world is what the world is, and India is going up a little bit. Now, I will have naysayers come up to me and say, doesn't matter what the US does, because China's going to swamp out everything. Okay, China may be swamping out an awful lot of things because they have an awful lot of people. But when you look at it per capita, it's us. It's people in the US that are really doing this. And that's what we have to be aware of. So don't just push this off and say it's China's fault or it's India's fault. It's not. It's us. Next slide will show that. This is cumulative CO2 emissions, and this is from 1750, I don't know why they started back then, but they did, to 2019. And this is in billion metric tons. I want you to look at the top line. The top line is the US. That's how much we in the US have put up into the atmosphere. And we'll talk about how long CO2 stays in the atmosphere. CO2 stays in the atmosphere at least 100 years and usually more like 1,000 years. It's very difficult to get it out, very difficult to get it out. You get it out by having plants. The methane and nitrous oxides come out a lot easier. And that's also, oh no, that's not, this is just CO2, I'm sorry. But anyway, again, the effects that we're having, the snow in the Hollywood Hills, the droughts, the floods, the everything, all of the vortices, the crazy vortices, polar vortices, we did it. It was us here in the US. So we, in my value system, then we have the obligation to work to try to reverse it. We're the ones that are making these problems. We need to do something. China comes next, Russia comes next, Germany comes next, and then they all just fall right down. But it's our very extravagant lifestyles that we have, and we do have very extravagant lifestyles. Next slide. So where in America are we getting these greenhouse gases, where they're coming from? 25% is coming from electricity. That's what turns on the lights, turns on the air conditioner, on and on and on. A little bit more than 25%, 27% comes from transportation. This is just in America. Those are two big, huge pieces there that we can tackle. We can tackle those. So that's over half. Then 11% comes from agriculture. That comes from the beef and the lamb, primarily. Not in totally, but primarily. Commercial and residential is 13%. And then we have this 20% for industry. And the industry is a tough one. It's like cement. And when we make cement, CO2 just escapes. It's going to be tough to deal with the industry. But there's the other ones that we can deal with. We can do that. Next slide, please. You also have methane emissions sources. Where are they coming from? Look, there's another big slice for energy. If we somehow deal with the energy issue, we're going to deal with both CO2 and methane at the same time. Woohoo! I like things like that. Then you have the 6% other, and I'm not real sure what the other is. 19% is waste. It's coming from our landfills. And that's something actually that I'd like to just throw in right now. When you have compostable stuff in your kitchen, hold on a minute. When you have compostable stuff in your kitchen, don't put it in your trash can. Put it in your compost. And I went out and I bought, it's by Vitamix or something like that, where I put my compostable into a machine, it dries it out, it crumbles it up, and I put it out in a bucket. And then when I plant my garden, I just turn it over into that. And it's fabulous. It's fabulous. But try not to put things that are going to rot into your landfill, basically, is what's happening. We don't want that to happen. And then we have agriculture. And agriculture is huge for methane because of the cows. That's really what's happening there. Okay, next slide. Okay, so that tells you about climate change since 1900. Now let's talk a little bit about what might happen in this cloudy crystal ball that I have. And here is the red-headed woodpecker. It occurs out at Mayaka. It also occurs out at the very end of Fruitville. If you've never been out to the end of Fruitville, you've got to go out to the very end of Fruitville. You go straight across Burma, and there's a little dirt road, and then there, to the right is this fabulous preserve, just fabulous preserve. And there's red-headed woodpeckers out there. But if we go up by 3 degrees Celsius above natural, they're not going to be able to survive the heat, and they won't be there anymore, which is really sad. Okay, let's talk about future climate change. Next slide. Okay, I show this slide all the time. I'm sure that you've seen this probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 times when I've given this talk. But I think it's a very, very, very important slide. It was done in the IPCC in 2004. And what it shows is what we think the projected, if you're going to look into the future and say what might happen in the future, what could happen for greenhouse gas concentrations. And the greenhouse gas concentrations are on the y-axis and time is on the x-axis. And the black curve, the top one, is business as usual. That's what's going to happen if we don't change. And the good news is that we actually have changed. I said this was in 2004. It has come down a bit because the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Accord, all of those have really made a difference, and it has come down a smidgen, but it's not much more than the width of a pencil line. So, but if you look at the green and the blue, that's where you have a very congenial Earth that we share technology. So we give the technology that we understand to China when they need to do something for mining coal, that type of stuff. It depends upon how congenial we're going to be, if we're going to be on the blue curve or the green curve. But now I want you to look at the red curve. And the red curve, what they said was in 2016 that all greenhouse gas concentrations are going to stop. No greenhouse gas concentrations are going to go up into the atmosphere anymore. They're going to stop. Boom, as if by magic, and it would be magic. Then why doesn't that red curve come down? Why is it staying up there? Because CO2 stays in the atmosphere from 100 to 1,000 years, and it's usually more like 1,000 than 100 years. It stays up there a long time. So when I flew here yesterday, the amount of CO2 that the plane put into the atmosphere when I flew here is going to be in the atmosphere for 40 generations. That's 39 great grandchildren. That's a long time for things that I did to be affecting my great 39 greats grandchildren. Ay, ay, ay. So what we do makes a big difference. It really makes a big difference. Next slide. Okay, this slide kept me awake last night. I was reading my news feed and I got an article that said if you only have one take-home message from the new IPCC that just came out on Tuesday, what came out on Tuesday is you have Working Group 1, which is about climate change, the climate science itself. Working Group 2, which is about adaptation and vulnerability, that's about ecology primarily. And then you have the third one, and I'm not going to remember the name of it, but what it does is how can we mitigate it? What can we do? Well, what they did was they said, we're going to, next slide please. What we're going to do is put a slide up there that shows what the temperature has been. And it's very similar to that circular one that then tipped up, you know. And you can see back in the early 1900s, it's cold. That's what the blue is. 1940, for some reason, it got a little bit warmer. Then it got a little bit cooler. Then in 1980, it starts getting warmer. In 2020, it is really warm. And you can see down here on the bottom what the scale is. And up on the top, that's again a projection. This is the new projection. And what we're saying is that you're going to have very high temperatures at the top and very low temperatures at the bottom. Very low temperatures, sorry folks, there's no way we're going to be able to do that. That's basically 1 degree or maybe 1.5 degrees, but that's going to be a tough one. Low is 2 degrees, intermediate 3, and then we go on up to 4 for the high and very high. And we don't want to have that happen. Next slide, please. Now, if you were born in 1950, I was born in 1954. My husband was born in 1950. In 2020, my husband was 70. And now you can see how warm it was over his lifetime, over my lifetime, over most of your lifetimes, right? My stepson was born in 1980, and you can see by 2050, when he is 70, how much warmer it is going to be. It is really strikingly warmer than what my husband and I are feeling when we're 70. And then I just had a grandniece was born. So let's say the grandniece was born in 2020. It was a little later, but anyway, look at how warm it's going to be when she's 70. That's very sobering to me. That is very sobering to me. This darling little girl that is just learning how to walk, that's how warm it's going to be. And the problem is, it's not going to just be warm, it's going to have all these abnormal things going all over the place. Snow's going to be happening in Hollywood Hills frequently, things like that. We're going to have tornadoes in California, droughts, floods, this type of stuff. So this is something that really is quite sobering. It really is quite sobering. Next slide, please. So what's going to happen in Sarasota? Well, again, this is on the x-axis is time, on the y-axis is temperature, and this is in degrees Fahrenheit. Now, the white line is the observed temperature, and if we don't do something about this, if we just sit back and pretend it's not happening, we're going to be on the continued emissions, and look how much warmer Sarasota, the average temperature of Sarasota, which the observed temperature thus far goes between 72 and 74 and a half-ish, something like that. Look how hot it's going to get in Sarasota. It's going to be miserable, absolutely miserable. But if we have significant cuts, it doesn't have to be that high. And we have the ability to stop that. We do. We're causing it. We can stop it. And that can happen. So this is going out to 2100. Next slide, please. Okay, sea level rise. I hate this slide, but I have to put it in. The reason I hate this slide is scientists don't know how ice melts. I know that sounds really weird, but we really don't know how ice melts. If ice is melting in Greenland, it forms water at the top in pools. What happens to that water? It goes down. Does it go all the way down to the bottom, go to the middle? They found it goes all the way to the bottom. And what it does is it acts like a slide for that ice to actually move. So it actually breaks off into glaciers more often. So, but we don't really understand how it all melts. And then we have to figure out what's going on with Antarctica. And we don't understand Greenland. We really don't understand Antarctica. The main thing is that we know that it's going to melt faster than we thought it was going to melt. When I first started doing this, they didn't think that that was going to be a problem at all. In the third assessment report, they didn't think it was a problem. And I can remember having arguments with the scientists saying, you're absolutely nuts. But I wasn't a glaciologist, so they didn't listen to me. Anyway, sea level rise. We know that it's gone up by 8 inches since 1880. We know that. That's a fact. Next slide. So what's it going to be in 2050? This is important for the flattest, the flattest state in the nation, Florida. Next slide. Our best estimate is 23 inches. I actually think that's low. I think that's quite low. But this is what the data say, so that's why I'm telling you this. In 2100, next slide. Next slide. The best estimate is 6.2 feet. And again, I actually think that's going to be low. I think it's going to be more like 9 feet. Next slide, please. So this is now the same type of slide as I showed you before, but instead of being actual temperature, this is model temperature, and instead of being in Fahrenheit, it's in centigrade. Sorry for all those changes. But what this does is it goes on the business as usual curve that wasn't quite as steep as the one I showed you, all the way out to 2100. So we're at there, 2100. 5 degrees C. Folks, if we go to 5 degrees C, the amount of suffering in the world is going to be horrific, absolutely horrific. The number of people that are going to be suffering is going to be in the billions. The number of species that are going to be suffering and going extinct are in the millions. We don't want this to happen. We don't want to stay on business as usual, and that's why I'm showing it to you. It's going up to 5 degrees C. Next slide, please. This is Greenland, and about, I was going to look it up and I didn't look it up. It was about 8 months ago, I think. Don't hold me to that, but I think it was 8 months ago. The scientists determined that there's nothing we can do now, no matter how much of the atmosphere we clean out. Greenland is going to melt all the way. And they can figure out the physics behind that. I don't know how they do it. I'm not a physicist. But it is now irreversible. There's irreversible melting of Greenland. Next slide. The amount of water in Greenland is between 27 and 29 feet. That's the best estimate. That's how much water, that's how much the globe is going to rise with Greenland melting. Ay, 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 ay. Next slide. That's what Florida will look like. Very sobering, isn't it? And people will say, well, Terry, when's that going to happen? I don't know. My crystal ball's too cloudy. But some people are saying it could happen as soon as 2150. I hope it's not that soon, but I don't know. This is 28 feet of sea level rise. Ay, ay, ay. And there's not much, I shouldn't say that. Our lovely governor has said all we have to do is put walls along there. That won't work because down in Miami, it's on limestone. And the water will just go underneath the walls and come right in. It doesn't work. He might want to put a wall in, but no matter what, it's not going to work. So there are places it will work. Maybe you can dam up right underneath the Golden Gate Bridge to keep the San Francisco Bay from going up. That's a possibility because that's not on limestone. There are places we can do this. Do we really want to do this? That's what we need to do. Well, anyway, that's what's going to happen with sea level rise. And I want you to all take sea level rise with a grain of salt because we really don't know. We really don't know how the ice is melting. And this is just Greenland melting. This is not Antarctica melting, and Antarctica is melting too. Next slide. So here's temperature. This was pre the Paris Accord. You remember when we had the Paris Accord? We had a COP in Paris. The COP is the something of the parties. Conference, thank you. I hate it when my mind goes blank. Conference of the parties. In Paris, this was before Paris, we were going to go up 4 degrees. Actually, we were going to go up a little bit higher, but let's just say it's 4 degrees. Next slide. The current pathway we're on right now is 3 degrees. This is by 2100. Next slide. This is what has been pledged by all of the governments, but none of the governments, actually some of the governments are doing better than others. Denmark is doing gangbusters. They're really doing it. It's a developed country, they can do it. If they can do it, for God's sake, we can do it, but we're not doing it. Anyway, this is what's been pledged by all the countries. So I'm going to go up 2 degrees. That's what the world will look like. Next slide. This is what we want. We want 1.5. We don't want to go any higher than that. I'll show you what's going to happen to some birds with this if we go to 1.5, 2, or 3. And it's a big difference, though that small amount is a big difference. But we want to stay at 1.5. We're not going to. We're on a trajectory right now to go blazing right past 1.5. I hope we don't go over 2, because all sorts of horrible things happen if we go to 2, and we can talk about that if you want to. Next slide, please. Other species. Here's the brown thrasher. When I lived in Sarasota, I had brown thrashers. I loved them because they were mimics, and they would sing, and they were fabulous. This is a bird that if we go up by 3 degrees C, it will not be occurring as frequently. The range will contract considerably out of Florida. Next slide. My late husband and I were lucky enough to go to the North Pole in 1994. This is a photograph that he took, and I'm sure some of you have seen this before. The ice was out everywhere. The polar bears were out on the ice. The seal would come up, the polar bears would whack it, and then fling blood and guts, literally. Blood and guts went everywhere. And that little bird, you see the little bird there? That's an ivory gull. And the ivory gull would go around and clean up all that blood and guts that got flung around. Well, we don't have the ice. The polar bears aren't going out and killing seals, good for the seals. But the ivory gull. The ivory gull, I am sure, will be extinct before I die. It's really plummeting in abundance. So it's going extinct on my watch. I have trouble with that. I have a lot of trouble with that. But this also shows you how everything is interlinked. Next slide, please. This is some work that I did back in 1995. I showed that plants and birds primarily, some other animals, but primarily birds, some insects, were doing things 2 weeks earlier in the spring than they were before. This is in 1995, and the real change started in about 1975. So in that 20-year period, they were coming back about 2 weeks earlier. Things were happening earlier. These are cherry blossoms in Washington, D.C., and they are blooming a lot earlier now than they used to. So things are changing in the spring. Things are changing in the fall. You all know that. You know, our daffodils are coming up earlier. I mean, things are happening a lot. So things are going on, and it's happening in the biological world. Next slide. The other thing that's happening is that these species are changing their ranges. They're going up where it's cooler in the mountains, and they're going toward the poles where it's cooler. So this is a study that was done by a man at Princeton University, John Terborg, in 1985, and he did a transect up this mountain that was 1,400 kilometers high, and he showed that, next slide, that the common scale-backed antbird, which this is a picture of it, only went up to 800 meters. Then, kilometers, sorry. Then, next slide. The versicolored barbet went from there on up to a little bit over 1,200 kilometers, and then you have on the top, next slide, is the variable antshrike. Now, students went back and redid this study, and next slide, showed that the common scale-backed antbird had actually shifted up, just like we expected. It has shifted up. The versicolored barbet has shifted up, and the variable antshrike has popped off the top. There's no place for it to go except extinct. And so species that are at the tops of mountains are the ones that are going extinct right now. We have a lot of species on the Sky Islands in southwestern US that are going extinct. Primarily, they are plants. There are a few arachnids, too, that are going extinct. But anyway, this is happening. This is happening on our watch. We know that this is happening. But now, as species are moving around, the other thing is, next slide. Oops, sorry, I got ahead of myself. This is the information about survival by degrees, is the information from the National Audubon Society. And what they did was they looked at how many birds are going to be affected if we go up 1.5 degrees Celsius above natural, 2 degrees Celsius above natural, or 3 degrees Celsius above natural. So this is a snail kite, and the snail kite is a very common bird down in Alligator Alley, is that what it's called? Alligator Alley? Yeah. Anyway, it's very common down, well, common. It was endangered for a while, now it's not anymore. So it's been a success. But it's going to be in trouble again as we start raising temperature because it's going to be too hot for it. Okay, next slide. So what they found, the Audubon Society found, was that 389 North American birds are going to be on the brink of extinction. 389. Next slide. That's 2/3 of all the birds in North America. 2/3 of all the birds in North America are going to be on the brink of extinction if we go up 3 degrees C. We don't want to go 3 degrees C. That's my point here. We want to stay below that. We have to stay below that. You too can look at this. It's a really fun, fun website to look at. Next slide. This is what you do, audubon.org/climate/survival by degrees. I always forget all of that. All I do is put in survival by degrees Audubon, and I'm able to bring it up. What you do is you put any zip code in there at all in North America, and up will come the birds that are going to be endangered. And it really is a very sobering. I do this all the time for different places where I give talks, and I just gave one on Monday in New York. And the difference between going up 1.5 degrees and going up 3 degrees is huge. It goes from 3 species going extinct to 29 species being on the brink of extinction. Okay, so what happens here? Next slide. Okay, so this is the Florida breeding birds that are highly vulnerable for an increase of 1.5 degrees, which is 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Next slide. There are 5 of them. Yellow-throated warbler, next. Fish crow, next. Gray kingbird, next. Snail kite, next. And the least tern. So if we go up when we go up 1.5 degrees above natural, we're going to lose these species. Okay, next slide. So what happens to the birds if we go up 2 degrees, which is 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit? We're going to lose, next, 7 species. Next. Okay, this is the least tern again, but that's not important. Next slide. It is not going to be a problem at 2 degrees because now there's going to be more coastline, and it's going to be able to survive. So if we barrel by 1.5 and it is able to hang on, it will be able to do just fine at 2 degrees. So that's good. Next slide. Red-headed woodpecker, next slide. Eastern towhee, next slide. And brown thrasher, and then that includes all the other ones except for the least tern that we had on the previous slide. Okay, next. And now we have what's going to go on with 3 degrees C, and it had all the 7 that we had before, plus the wonderful, gorgeous boat-tailed grackle that squawks and is iridescent and is beautiful. So there's a difference. It's a survival by degrees. We want to have as few as actually shift, so we want to keep the temperature low so that the birds are able to survive. Now, birds are able to move around, and that's what this is showing, is they move around, they move out of Florida. But the trouble is, next slide, can you think of yourself being a bird or a butterfly and trying to cross over that? Tough thing to do. And that's what a lot of species are running into. So what I want to say is there's something that you and I can do about this. When I was here, I did it. I took my front yard, bulldozed it under. Well, that's an exaggeration. I didn't bulldoze it under. But anyway, I got rid of the grass. And I put in, next slide, native plants. And we need to have native plants. And I really, really want you to not ever plant a non-native plant, ever, ever, ever again, because unless you're going to eat it. Non-native plants are not good for the species that need to survive. Native plants are good for the species that need to survive. So how do you know what's native and what's not? Next slide. You go to Audubon. See, I'm making an advertisement for Audubon. Sorry, I don't really mean to be doing this, but this is what they've done. Is audubon.org, and then it says plants for birds. This is also plants for insects, plants for herbs, plants for all sorts of things, but they do birds, so they call it plants for birds. What you do, you go there and you put in your zip code. They print off a whole list of all the native plants. You take that print off and go to your native garden or non-native garden and tell them you want these, and they'll say, we don't have any of them. Then you have to go to a native garden. That's what I had to do, at least. And that's what you plant. When my husband and I did this in Sarasota, we went from seeing 3 species of butterflies in our front yard to 12. I'm not lying. 3 to 12. And it happened almost overnight. It's like there was some kind of neon sign going, native plants, native plants, native plants. I don't know how they found it, but they did. And it is absolutely fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. So that's what we need to do. There were butterflies in Baja California that came up against Tijuana and San Diego and couldn't get across. They're now extinct. They went extinct on our watch. If there had been native plants to help them through, they maybe could have made it. So please, don't ever plant another Chef Lara. I know it's Florida friendly, but it's not friendly to our species. Next slide, please. Everything goes extinct. Background extinction rate is less than 1 species in 1,000 species over 1,000 years. What does that mean? Take a great big island, put 1,000 different species on it, watch it for 1,000 years, and less than 1 species is going to go extinct. That's what background extinction is. Okay, what's the extinction rate now? Next slide. Current extinction rate is about 1 species in 10, not 1,000, 10 species over less than 100 years. It's down to about 75 years now. So I used to say we were in the beginning of a mass extinction event. We're not. We're in a mass extinction event, and it's on our watch. On our watch. I have trouble with that morally. It really is not good. Next slide. Now, with the IPCC fourth assessment report, what we did was we wanted to figure out how many species were going to go extinct. I work on extinction of birds, which is not a fun thing to work on. But we decided that if we go up, and it's not really an if, it's when we go up 2 degrees C, which is 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, we could lose 500,000 species in extinction, 500,000 species in extinction, if we go up, when we go up 2 degrees C above natural. Next slide. Since we know about 2 million species, we've named 2 million species, 500,000 is 1/4 of the world's species. So we're going to lose 1/4 of the world's species when we go up 2 degrees above natural. Next slide. We were wrong. The new studies that are coming out are showing, next slide, that we're going to lose actually half the world's species when we go up by 2 degrees, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Half the world's species. I guarantee you that species that we need to clean our water, clean our air, pollinate our plants, on and on and on, are going to be in those species. We need those species for us to stay alive. And do we really, really have the right to cause the extinction of half the species on the planet? There's really probably about 8 to 10 million species on the planet. We're talking 4 million to 5 million species. I have a hard time with that. Next slide. Okay, I promised you were going to be really depressed, right? Ready to cut your wrists? Okay, we're now going to talk about what we all must do and what our government has done, and our government has done a lot. Next slide. First thing we have to do is have a paradigm shift. I've shown you this before. Blow in her face and she'll follow you anywhere. I bet every single woman in here would say, some man comes up to me and blows smoke in my face. But this shows 2 things, 2 paradigm shifts. It's not polite. That's the best way to put it. It's not polite to smoke in public, right? You all remember when we would get on an airplane and they'd say, do you want smoking or unsmoking? Well, the whole plane stunk, right? Okay, so there's been a change. And also, there's a woman lib thing here. Blow in her face, she'll follow you. No, there's no way that's going to happen. We've had 2 paradigm shifts. We have paradigm shifts all the time. We need a really strong paradigm shift. I actually think that the young people in the world are pushing that paradigm shift. I think that's what's happening. And us old folks have to get out of the way and let them do it. I really believe that's true. We have to have this paradigm shift. Next slide. Okay, this is talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. Why am I talking about inflation in a climate change talk? It's because in the Inflation Reduction Act, there is $369 billion with a B dollars that are going to work on climate change. Woohoo! This is huge. So what the scientists have said is we need to get down by 2030. On this axis, you have gigatons of CO2 equivalent, so that's CO2, methane, nitrous oxide. We have to have, by 2030, we want to be at half of what it was in 2005. 2005, it was 6.6, so by 2030, we want it to be down to 3.3. The IRA gets us down to 3.8. That's okay. We're getting there. We're doing it. We're working on it, and it's wonderful. We can do this. We can do this. So now, next slide. What's actually going to happen? This is what they're talking about cutting by 2030. We're going to cut the amount of transportation by 29%. 29%. How are we going to do that? Electric vehicles, right? Power. We're going to cut power, the amount of emissions we're getting from power, by 37%, for heaven's sakes. We're going to do that by wind and by solar. Then you have the non-CO2 greenhouse gases. Those are the methane and all of that. We need to be plugging up the holes that the oil wells are leaking all the methane out. That's going to be a tough job to do. So we're going to only go down by 6%. Buildings, I don't understand why buildings are only 6%, but they are. We know how to make buildings energy efficient, how we can be emitting 0 emissions. Why is it only 6%? I don't know, but that must be a political thing. I don't know. I don't know if it is or not. 9% is land carbon sinks. What that means is, like when I flew out here, I paid a place called cooleffect.org to plant trees to offset my carbon. We're going to start planting more trees. We're going to plant more native grasses that have really long roots that are actually sequestering carbon. That type of stuff, that's the 9%. Industry is going to be 13%. I have no clue how they're going to do that. We don't know how to do that. I don't know what they're going to be doing. Some kind of magic, I don't know. But let's look at all of this. Next slide. Okay, so now on the x-axis, again, is always time. On the y-axis is millions of metric tons of CO2 equivalent. The green now, the 2030 has the numbers in the column. So you can see what has happened, what they're projecting to happen for 2024, 2026, 2028. Then we get to 2030. Transportation is they are going to decrease CO2 emissions, CO2 equivalent emissions in millions of tons by 280 million tons of CO2 equivalent in 2030. That's the green. Next slide. The yellow is power. They're going to decrease it by 360 million tons of CO2 equivalent. Next slide is industry. They're going to decrease it by 130. Next slide. The next slide, and the next slide. The next one is for buildings, non-CO2 gases and land sinks. All that fits together into the 210 million metric tons that they're going to reduce. That's what our government has said we're going to do, and they're paying for it. I think that's fabulous. It's absolutely fabulous. We're really going to do something. So, next slide. This is one of the ways they're going to do it. They're going to decrease the amount of petroleum products. This is millions of barrels per year. They're going to decrease from 48 million barrels. They're going to decrease 48 million barrels by 2024, 280 by 2026. You can see the numbers as they go on down. That's what they're going to do. Woohoo! It's going to be tough because we have a need for plastics, and plastics for every for every pound of plastic that is made, 6 pounds of CO2 goes into the atmosphere. And we're going to have so much plastic by 2050. I was going to look up that number, I'm sorry, but it's huge. So we're going to have to be, because plastic comes from petroleum, we're going to have to be mining petroleum. So to do this at the same time when we're increasing up in plastics, the thing that we all in this room have to do is stop using plastics. That's hard to do, but we can do it. Next slide. Okay, this is a tough slide, so I'm going to build it for you. On the x-axis is time, so it goes from 2015 to 2020. Those are actual data. From there on this way, it is what's going to be modeled, what we're going to do with the IRA. And that's what's going to happen. On the y-axis is gigawatts per hour. And what it is the yearly capacity addition. How much each year are we going to add by these different things to get this gigawatts per year? So the first slide shows coal with CC. CC is carbon capture. So we've not done any carbon capturing from coal. What happened to it? Go ahead, hit the slide. There we go. So you see this, the 3 little blocks right there? There's not going to be much. It's not going to do much at all. But anyway, they are going to start doing carbon capture. The point of this is they're going to start doing carbon capture of coal. That's good. Next slide. This is gas. Gas is not going to change much. If you look at the numbers, it's going to stay what it's been, about 10 gigawatts, 15 gigawatts, not even that much. It's going to stay about the same. It's not going to change with the IRA. Next slide. This is now gas with carbon capture. They're actually going to capture the carbon from the gas, and we haven't done that before. So we're going to start doing it, and it's going to make a difference. It really, truly will, I think. Next slide. This is for nuclear. The only one is on 2016. There's 2 gigawatts increased in 2016. Why did that increase in 2016? I have no idea. I think it's a really weird number, and I'm sure we could look it up. But anyway, the point is that they're not relying on nuclear coming in the future. Okay? Next slide. This is onshore winds. You can see it's been dribbling along from 2015 to 2020, but then it's going to jump by 29 gigawatts per year. Then it's going to have another jump, 39 gigawatts per year. Then it's going to have a huge jump, 45 gigawatts per year. So and then it's not going to jump so much. And I don't know why that is, but that's what their models told them. Anyway, we're going to really, really be pushing onshore winds. Next slide. This is offshore winds, and I'm really disappointed in this one. I think we need to have offshore winds. I'm on the Renewable Energy Wildlife Institute, and we're all pushing for offshore winds. This is not reflected here, and I don't know why. Europe is very strong into offshore winds. They've shown that you can do it. We need to be doing it. But we're doing it a bit, but we're not doing it that much. Next slide. And this is solar. And so we've been dribbling along again from 2015 to 2020, and then bam, we're going to be hitting it hard. So now all of us that are investing, this is telling you should go and invest in wind and solar because the US is going to be investing in it. I really think this is important. Next slide. This now is showing you all of the different ones for wind and for solar. There's a lot that is going to be going on with wind and solar, and that is super positive, and I want all of you, please, to support wind and solar. I know that Florida Power and Light doesn't really want you to have solar panels. Don't listen to them. We need to have solar panels. What they're doing is going out and bulldozing areas that are pretty, in some areas, they're really pretty pristine areas, and putting in solar farms. We already have naked places to put solar. It's on your housetop. It's easy. It's already been cleared. All you do is just slap it on and turn it on, and woohoo, you got it. And we had it in Sarasota, and it was great. We literally paid $9 for our electricity, and we had our own water well, and we had septic. So all we paid for utilities here was $9. It really makes a difference. You all can put solar on. If you're not in a condo, you can put solar on. HOAs cannot keep you from putting solar on your house. They cannot. It is a law. So, and right now with the IRA, you get, I hate to say numbers that I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it's 30% back. Does anybody know? 30%. 30%? I think it's 30% back. So go for it. Woohoo! That's what we need to do. So you're getting 30% back, and then you'll be able to pay whatever Florida Power and Light now says you have to pay, which is probably more than $9, which we were paying when we were here. Yeah. How much is it? $30. $30. Holy mackerel, it went up by 3? Holy mackerel, and I've only been gone a year. Wow. Well, anyway, as I said, Florida Power and Light they really don't want you to have solar on your house, but put solar on your house. It's an obvious place to do it. Sorry. Next slide. Now, everybody says that we have to worry about wind turbines killing birds. Wind turbines don't kill birds. Cats kill birds. 4 orders of magnitude. 4 orders of magnitude more birds are killed by cats than by turbines. So it's all lobbying by the oil and gas industry to say, oh, those poor baby birds, they're being killed by cats. If you have a cat, that's wonderful. Don't let it outside. If you're gonna have to let it outside, please don't do that. But if you've gotta let it outside, only let it out in the daytime, not at night, because it kills birds at night a lot more than they do in the daytime. Anyway, I could go on and on and on. But anyway, turbines don't kill birds. Cats kill birds. Next slide. This is employment by resources. And we have coal, natural gas, oil, and coal are down at the bottom. By 2035, there's quite a peak going down, so we're losing jobs. We're losing those jobs. Yep. And the coal unions are aware of it, and they are trying to teach their union employees that they need to get another skill, and they are really working at it. But then everything else is going to be increasing. So you have wind manufacturing, solar manufacturing, coming up with a grid, and then coming up with CO2 transportation and storage. So, and you can see the black line, this is how many jobs you're going to have. It doesn't go all the way up to the top because it realizes that it's minusing out at the bottom. Okay, but by 2030, we're going to have 1.7 million more jobs in solar, wind, the grid, CO2 transport and storage. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of jobs. As I say, you need to be investing in solar and wind because that's what the government's doing. They're doing that. The IRA is doing that. Next slide. This is one that I show all the time. I'm sure you've seen this and you're probably sick and tired of seeing it, but to me it's the one that is the most hopeful. On the x-axis is location, on the y-axis is ton of CO2 emissions per capita. And you can see DC, New York, and California, they all know what to do. Wyoming, North Dakota, and West Virginia don't give a you-know-what. The point is that we know what to do. New York and California know what to do. Does it take regulations? Yes. When I lived in California, I used to say, I've never met a regulation I didn't love. That's how Californians are. We love regulations, absolutely love regulations. So, yes, it's going to take regulations. But Wyoming gets its electricity from coal, so that's why it's so high. California doesn't, neither does New York. So there are things, again, I said, we're causing this so we can stop it. We know what to do to stop it. That is such a positive message. Next slide. Okay, so here are the greenhouse gases I showed you before in the US. Let's talk about what we can actually do. Next slide. All of us in this room, what all of us in this room are going to make a pact to do. Okay? Next slide. For electricity, we're going to support renewable energy. Solar rooftops, solar farms if you have to, but solar rooftops are important. Wind farms, we need to be supporting wind farms. Only buy Energy Star appliances. You can do that. You just go online and look for the Energy Star and you buy the best one. Is it going to cost more money? Yes. Is it going to save the world in the long run? Yes. It's worth saving the world in the long run. The other thing is that I am just amazed at how many incandescent light bulbs people still have. If you have an incandescent light bulb, I give you the permission to throw it in the landfill, even if it hasn't burnt out yet. Throw it in the landfill. That includes your Christmas tree lights. Okay? Okay, next slide. Transportation. I want you all to make a pact with me. The next car that you buy, the very next car that you buy is either electric or it's a plug-in hybrid. We have an electric Leaf. I love it. I love driving. It scares my husband to death because I'll come up to a light and then up comes one of these big old trucks and they look over and they say, oh, here's this little old lady in this car. And she goes, vroom, vroom, vroom. And I say, and then the light changes and I go like this. And my husband says, for God's sake, Terry, you're going 80 and a 30. I say, yeah, but I beat him. Electric vehicles, aren't they? You guys have one, they're fabulous. Okay, and we just bought a plug-in hybrid. We just bought a Toyota RAV4 Prime. It plugs in, you get 40 miles on electricity, and then it switches over to like a Prius. And it's wonderful. And it gets up our driveway, which is nice, and the Leaf has trouble doing that. Anyway, but make me a pact. When you buy your next car, please, please make it be a plug-in, please. If you don't want an electric, all electric, then get a plug-in hybrid. Next slide. Okay, agriculture. Our diet is horrible. We eat too much beef. We feed beef to our cats and our dogs. We've got to stop it. We eat too much dairy. We've got to stop it. So what I want you to do is make me a pact that we're going to have meatless Mondays. That sounds so clever. But we need to do more than just one day a week, so that's why I put the plus after that. So we have meatless Mondays, meatless Thursdays, meatless Saturdays. Or a friend of mine says she picks one meal a day and has no beef or lamb and has no dairy in that one meal every single day. All I'm trying to do is get you to think about it, because we really don't want to eat beef. Plus that it's not good for you. If you have to eat beef, then do me a favor, buy it from someplace like Blue Nest Beef. I don't have any stock in Blue Nest Beef, but what they do is they raise beef, and it's certified by the Audubon Society, and says that they are saving grassland birds. Our grassland birds in North America are the ones that are dropping in abundance the fastest, by far. So they have figured out how to grow beef to not kill the birds. They are doing excellent, excellent work. The other thing is, it's a pain in the tuchus to actually buy beef through them. What you do is you buy the beef, so you have to go online. You don't just go to the store and buy beef. That's easy. You go online, you order the beef, they ship it to you, and it's expensive. So I'm going to get you to stop eating beef one way or the other. So anyway, there are many companies like Blue Nest Beef. That's just an example. But anyway, it's a good company. It's a very good company. That's just my... And you've got to worry about what you're feeding your cats and your dogs, because a lot of that has beef and lamb in it. If you're not eating beef or lamb and your dog is, that's not helping much. Next slide. Zero emission buildings. We all need to go to our county commissioners and say, I want to change the regulations and say you're not going to ever build another building that is not zero emissions. Is it going to be more expensive? Yeah. Is it going to be the right thing to do? Yeah. Is it going to help save the world? Yeah. So we all have got to do that. I know the commissioners in Florida are tough. They're owned by the developers a lot. You got to be careful. We got to really work hard at this, but we can do it. Next one, plant trees for industry. Industry is a tough one because it's going to take technology, and that's a tough thing to do. But what we can do is we want to get the CO2 out of the atmosphere. Okay, plant trees, and by planting trees, we'll get the CO2 out of the atmosphere. One of the places that does that, what I do for my brother for Christmas, when I can never think of something to get him, I will go to cooleffect.org. They plant trees. I pay him money, and they plant the trees. They plant the right kind of trees. They plant the right kind of trees the right way in the right places. There are a lot of places that plant non-native trees. You don't want that. They plant monocultures of the same age. You don't want that. Cooleffect.org. Again, I have no stock with them, but they are doing a really good job. So if you want something, a Christmas present for somebody who you don't know what to give them, do cooleffect.org. Okay, next slide. This is the one that I can't stress hard enough. I was just up at Cornell, and I was shocked at how many of the students weren't even registered to vote. If any of you are not registered to vote, I should have brought my voter registration forms. But anyway, it's easy to register to vote. By not voting, you're voting. We need to do something. When Trump got elected, I literally cried because it was going to set back, and what people have said is we set back by 30 years. Other people have said 80 years by what he did. We can't afford that again. We can't. We've got to do something. So voting really matters. And even in Florida, I promise you, it really matters. Next slide. And this is the slide I always end with, so I'm sure you've seen this before. You remember when this was taken. All of us in this room were alive when this was taken. First time I saw that, I thought, holy mackerel, look how beautiful it is and look how tiny it is. We don't have a planet B. We just have our Earth, and we need to be taking care of it. And we have the money to be able to do that. We have the time to be able to do that. We have the knowledge to be able to do that. We just have to do it. And now our government is putting $369 billion towards doing something. So let's support them. We can do this. We really can make a difference because we don't want to go up to 5 degrees above natural by 2100. Thank you all. Next slide. Thanks for listening. Oh my heavens. Oh my heavens, I didn't realize I went over so far. Oh, that's just, go ahead, you can put the cartoon out. It is really a good one. You guys can read it while we're... So anyway, I apologize for going so far over. I didn't realize I had. I wasn't watching the clock. I shouldn't tell so many stories. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Anyway. Oh, no.
answering a few questions?
I would be happy to answer some questions. I'm sure I didn't say anything controversial.
He says, okay. Am I on? Okay. Anybody have any questions from Terry? Her presentations, like Lori said, she's been here 4 times, and I think like wine, she just gets better with age.
You're sweet. You're so sweet.
An excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Loved it. A number of us are engaged in the Citizens Climate Lobby, which is designed to create a fee on carbon and return it to the taxpayers. It's revenue neutral, but it's
right.
Basically, essentially creates a marketplace on carbon. Do you think that would be an effective solution?
Oh, absolutely. I think it is. We have an awful lot of things in our bags that we can be doing. The IRA has picked some things. They haven't picked that one, but they have picked some things. And that is another one that I think they need to be picking to do it and add it in. Having a fee on carbon is in my humble opinion, the right way to do it. I have felt that way ever since I had I'm a biologist, but I decided I needed to take an economics class. I do. I needed to. There you go. And economics is very, very important. And in that class, I did a paper for that class on, this was when I was a professor. Anyway, I did this paper on doing carbon fees, taxing carbon. And to me, it just made a lot of sense. And that was probably my late husband was still alive, so it was probably 2002, something like that. I think it's a fabulous idea, and I think we all need to be supporting the CCL. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's going to be introduced in the next Congress.
That's what?
A carbon fee and dividend bill will be introduced in the next Congress, but it's going to take a lot of bipartisan work.
And don't expect it to pass, but that's okay. The more times it gets put in front of the people, they're going to realize it. And so when it gets introduced, everybody needs to call your senator or congressman and tell them that this is the right thing to do. I don't care if they're a Republican, you still need to call them and tell them. So.
Have you seen the documentary Kiss the Ground? Kiss the Ground.
Somebody else asked me that. No.
That is an absolutely fantastic.
Kiss the Ground.
Oh, and by the way, make sure you buy an electric car. They're fantastic.
They are fantastic.
And you get, I know, you get all your oil changes are free.
I know, all the oil changes are free. That's right. So Kiss the Ground. So if you have an opportunity, does anybody know where you can get Kiss the Ground?
We have, last Monday, we had a session like this, and the highlight was the video, Kiss the Ground.
Oh my gosh.
And we have...
It's on Netflix.
Yeah, it's on Netflix.
Okay, there you go.
And if you talk to Mary sitting back there, has my wife given you the DVD back yet? No. Honey, give her back the DVD, please. She has a copy of it. And there are 2 versions. There's the 85-minute version, and then there is a classroom version, which
Shorter.
reduces it to like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And I forget the actor.
Woody
is the narrator. And
he's wonderful.
It's really good. And what it talks about is regenerative agriculture. And I believe there is an ag bill coming up. And I wish we'd brought it along. If we get your email or something, we can send you a website where you can indicate that you're for regenerative agriculture. And when this list is compiled, it's going to be given to the representatives and senators in DC, showing that there is support for regenerative agriculture. And basically, Terry pointed out, you get some of the grasses, the native grasses like tall blue stem and so forth. the roots go down 10, 12 feet, and it's sequestering a lot of carbon.
Yes.
And that's the whole idea of the regenerative agriculture. I got 2 people back here because I talk too much.
I don't have a question, I have a request. Could you get from Terry the websites that she told us to go to and make a list of them and email them to us?
The one for...
Cool Effect, Blue Nets Beef. Okay, you're going to have my whole, your whole presentation. They have my whole presentation, so it's all there. Okay?
Pastor Mike, that's going to be on our webpage then, Terry's presentation? So if anybody wants to see it again or, pass it on to someone, it should be available. Anybody else have any questions, concerns?
I do. I wanted to say, something that I'm asked oftentimes is, what do I do about my Uncle Mike that just doesn't care? Okay, Uncle Peter. That's better, not Uncle Mike. Okay, Uncle Peter or Uncle Harry, who doesn't really care one way or the other if climate change is important. What do you do about that? Let me tell you about another thing that you should do. There is a movie called Chasing Ice. It is a beautiful movie. And it used to be on Netflix, and I'm sorry, I don't know if it still is or not. But you should try and find it. Chasing Ice. The photography is to die for. It is absolutely beautiful. And the thing is what you're doing is watching ice melt. It sounds really boring, but it's really beautiful. And it convinces people, I'm a talking head on there about how plants and animals are being affected. And I have to say, this will give you impetus to watch it. I have to say, this girlfriend of mine watched it and said, Terry, what you said was absolutely beautiful, but boy, do you need a new hairstyle. So don't look at my hairstyle. But anyway, if you have them watch this movie or you watch it with them, it will light a fire under people to make them understand that there's something that needs to be done. And it's not punching them in the face. It's a very easy way to bring people from who don't really care or who are a little bit negative up and say, we got to do something. So Chasing Ice, they've also done Chasing Coral, but Chasing Ice is the one that I think works best. So. And
another idea, Terry, is we just got our homeowners insurance, and it went up, I think, a little over 50%. So when people talk to me and complain about, and a lot of times I'll start the conversation so I can kind of, snare them. I'll say, how's your home insurance? Did it go up? Yeah, mine went up. I said, so did I. I'm hearing rumors that it's this climate change thing. I wonder if it could be. I wonder if it could be climate change that's causing all these storms. That's
yeah. Get people to just start thinking about it. That's all I'm asking you to do. And I do apologize for keeping you guys here so late. Anyway, I enjoy you all so much. You get so much energy. Oh wait, there's another question.
We'll stay till midnight. If we have to, we'll answer every question.
Have you ever heard of the American Forest? I bought trees from them. You gave the name of a place. And
I haven't, no.
Okay.
American Forest. They could be just as good as cooleffect.org. I don't know. I had when I did my research, I had about 7 different places, and Cool Effect just kept coming up to the top. Okay. So I don't know about the other ones. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I just wanted to let everybody know that the estuary, the Chinip, years ago they never mentioned climate change. Last week they had a 2-day conference, both days, with speakers on climate change. So you want to support the estuary. They need volunteers. We have seagrass that's in trouble, and it's all about sequestering carbon, and we can do that with our mangroves, our salt marshes, all of that, but we need to help out the estuary because they're all on board.
You need to be helping out, okay, we got to quit. We need to be helping out the acreage that's at the back of the church too. That can be put into native plants, and it could help save save species.
I would like to invite you to join the Peace River Audubon. I went to that climate summit, the 2 days, and if anybody wants to see it this week, I think by the end of this week, it will be on videos. All you have to do is to go to the CHNEP, CHNEP website, and you can also go to Peace River Audubon website. And we are starting there's no native plant nursery in Charlotte County right now. And so we are starting one out at CHEC, the Charlotte Harbor Environmental Center. And so we got a grant from Florida Power and Light and Audubon. And so we are beginning to put the plants out. And we've done tree giveaways last year, but just look for our site, and we'll be doing a lot more in the future. So
that's wonderful. That's fabulous. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Pastor Mike. Thank you all.
One last thing, on April 22nd, which is Earth Day, we will be having an Earth Day celebration here at the church. We have a food truck with soul food coming, and last year their collards were out of sight. And we'll have a band, and we'll have displays, and we have different groups coming, so it'll be from 10 o'clock till 2 o'clock, and we'd like to invite you, your friends, neighbors, anybody you could drag over. In fact, we've been thinking about showing the video, Kiss the Ground, or Kiss the Earth. Yeah. I always get those mixed up. Kind of the same place. So that's it. Thank you for coming.